Here in St. Petersburg, I got a personal note from Barack Obama. The President of the United States, through Obama for America, sent me a personal note reminding me to go out and vote in the mayor's race. Now, I signed up for all of it, emails from all the parties, so I'm sure I confuse all these mass distributors of information because they can't figure out, where is he, which is good. But having said that, I think you're going to be seeing that as being a growing threat. Republicans just really don't seem to have their act together as much as the Democrats did as far as the new media is concerned, and I think Adam would attest to that. And it's interesting because, for some reason, this last presidential cycle, the most popular contribution was, guess how much? $3. $3. Every time the communication came out of the DNC, all they asked for was $3. Just $3. $3. Well, it may not seem like much, but when you have 10, 20, 30 million answer with $3, it's just one of those areas that we, the public, are going to have to continually watch in terms of how the internet is being used. And lastly, I'm always perplexed by why in our society today personality always seems to trump policy. I don't think that's a good trend going forward in the future. I would hope that our viewers are not, and listeners are not, what one radio commentator has called the low information voter. That's the part that scares me in our process, is that we need to have people that know more about what's going on, that ask questions, that read newspapers. I'm surprised how many young people don't even read the newspaper anymore. That's not good for society. And also that the internet came with the promise, have all this wealth of information, we'll all be better informed. Well, you know what we all do? We all go only to the media that we agree with. We tend not to go to the other side. So in this quest to have a better informed electorate, I don't think that there's anything that makes that better than people just wanting to be curious and wanting to have a say in the way that they are governed. And lastly, what the heck does the city of St. Petersburg want to do with a pier? Can't you people make up your minds? I mean, really, that's the interesting thing in this whole debate about, well, what do you want? Somebody draws something out there, why are you really opposed to it? And then, of course, all the misinformation that was out there that the media was trying to divulge and explain to the public. But the public believes what it wants to believe. I'll shut up.
Thank you. We appreciate hearing from both of you. You both have provided a lot of insight for us, so thank you. At this time, we'd like to start our question and answer session. I'm going to let you each take turns. You have a microphone. You can either sit there or stand up, whichever is easier. It might be easier to stand so everybody can see you. I know you're tall, but hey. Just saying. Anyway, Al, let's choose first.
Oh, I get to choose. You get to choose. I have to ask you. Oh, you're just close.
Hi, David Clement. Question for Adam. You seem to have assumed that it's going to be a two-way race in Congress for the Bill Young seat. Isn't there room for a Republican candidate who has better name recognition, but perhaps not the financial prowess of Mr. Jolly? Without naming any, maybe you could name names. Wouldn't somebody with great name recognition have a chance to be the Republican nominee?
Yeah, and I think I wasn't.
I think I wasn't clear because I'm assuming it's just out of sync, and I have a hard time believing that David Jolly is definitely in, and he is more. I have a hard time believing he'll be the only one. He's not a household name. He's got a lot of experience in Washington. He's got a lot of connections where he's going to raise a lot of money. But I do think we're very likely to have a Republican primary. You're going to see a lot of pressure from Washington because this is the race everybody's watching. You almost never have a district that is truly competitive like this one, let alone a district that has no incumbent running. So there's going to be a lot of pressure. It's very hard to. This is probably a $3 million race on both sides. So they don't want to waste time on a primary. And you're going to have some people very well that may decide, I'm not going to go for this primary, but I'm going to run for the regular election in August when there's a real primary. Anyway, I do think there's a chance of another candidate. A lot of people have been dropping out like flies. Keep an eye on Frank Hibbert, the former mayor of Clearwater. He seems to be, as far as I can tell, the only one who is very serious. And Jack Blackfella has a knack for causing trouble and being mischievous. He seems to have a problem with David Jolly, so Jack Blackfella seems to be shopping for another candidate.
Thank you, Adam. And this is a question for both you and Al. And to just get into a different venue, do you think in the element we are in today, with a lot of the shocking news, and I'm talking about the mental problem individuals who are taking guns in different venues, do you think that the news directors who are sending these stories out, are we providing too much news of this variety for families?
At Vegas 9, we have policies that were established very early on, it's called crime guidelines. We follow those guidelines to the letter. By that, we mean we actually look at the landscape. I'll give you a good example. I think it was last Wednesday or Thursday. We had 4 overnight murders. And so we had to look at that and say, okay, you can't not tell people about that. But then after we had the 4 overnight murders, they wanted us to do an interview on the Dante Morris trial. So what we did was, we backed off on doing the Dante Morris trial because when you do so many negative stories in a row, people get the impression that that's the way things are. Now, I don't know about other news organizations. We do serve as a filter in one way or another. And we do have parameters that we follow as to what we will advertise and what we won't advertise. But I'm telling you, there are just some days when it just seems like it's a full moon and the world is going wacko. Now, I'll quote David Brinkley, who used to say this: 99.9% of the time, there's nothing happening in the world. The other 0.1% is what you see on the evening news.
What do you say?
I think he said it best. I couldn't say it better.
Yeah, go ahead.
Bob Skransky, I have a question for you now. You said that Obama only got $3. It seems to me that somehow you seem to forget that the night of Benghazi, he did not tell the truth about that attack, and then he was flying out to California for a $30,000 contribution, and then also talked about how well the Democrats are using the media. Why don't you say the media is defending and supporting Democrats? Because guess what? On the Times World, okay, thank you. The question is, how come?
Well, I can answer the first part. You won't see that on Vegas 9 because we stay right down the middle on all those issues. It's not that we don't report them, but we don't report them with the vigor that, say, a Fox network does, or, on the other hand, some of the major networks come these other issues. Because we find that, as far as Vegas 9 is concerned, we are hyper-local. People want to see local news, and that's primarily what we present. Not that these other issues aren't issues that should be talked about in some light, and they are. You can find out more information on those. But we're not trying to shield anybody from information. And the $3 things, believe it or not, because I talked to a bunch of Obama people, and literally somebody did a bunch of research and found out that the ideal amount of money to ask for people who do not normally contribute to a campaign is $3. I mean, somebody did research on that kind of stuff, so pretty shocking. You want to answer that? Probably haven't done it.
No.
We need to get to some of the other female side because we've done all guys. Yes, thank you.
Willie Radowski, why doesn't the media go back to candidates and try to force real answers to questions rather than just take the sound bites?
That's a great question. And believe me, we try. It's not easy, especially when you're talking about a presidential candidate where they are in a bubble, where you really, very rarely do they take questions. Barack Obama very rarely gives press conferences. And when he does, if it's an hour-long press conference, he filibusters for so long, you're lucky to get about 4 questions out of it. And it's one of the things I've learned from Al and doing TV. You know, these politicians, you are trained to say what, you're trained to basically ignore the question and say what you want to say and say your soundbite. And so one of the struggles you have, you've got somebody saying, okay, you've got 6 minutes left, you've got 4 minutes left. Sometimes you have to cut somebody off and try to get an answer. And sometimes you look rude if you do it 4 times because the politician is basically refusing to answer the question asked. We should do better at that, but that's almost the whole goal of a political campaign these days, is to not answer the question that you, not to only say what they want to say. there's a message they want to give out, and they don't want to stray from that. They want to be as little as possible.
Yeah, I agree with the same thing. Any of the other doctors want to ask some questions? Right over here. You want a question? $1.4 billion. That's Adam's and mine combined income from our shows. She's hilarious.
So my name is Lisa Hartman, and obviously as a high school student, we're the emerging group of young voters. I actually just turned 18 today and missed the election by 2 days. So my question is, you brought up the fact that you really get information from websites. What do you propose that the media and press can do to bridge the disconnect between the younger generation and local politics so that facilitate a more involved and knowledgeable emerging voter pool so that we can make more involved sort of decisions which would have more superficial knowledge and be really true to look at both sides?
For people like you to run for office as soon as you can.
Well, I think you get your information from websites and Twitter and Facebook, but really, in a lot of ways, we're getting that information from the mainstream media. I mean, what you're seeing on Twitter and Facebook is often an article that I wrote or a TV clip that Al did. So, what gets young people more involved and more interested in public affairs? It's hard to say, and I think people have been asking that forever. It may be when your mayor starts reaching into your pocketbook and paying taxes, or maybe when the pothole is growing bigger and bigger, nobody's doing anything about it, or they can't get health care, or something like that. This stuff matters, and you'll see that more and more.
And actually, the more you have at stake in your own life in the election, the more interest you will take. And the reality is that people tend to become more conservative as they get older because they have more stashes of money that they would like to see actually be there when they retire, rather than having somebody say, don't worry about it, it'll be there, and then all of a sudden you get there, it's gone. So it's got to do with your own involvement. But I'm serious, you have to talk it up among your friends and say, here's why you need to get involved. And pick 1, 2, or 3 issues. Don't try to digest everything. But find a couple of issues that you know are important to you. Find lawmakers that agree with your position. Work with them. Get out there. That's how you keep people involved in the process.
How about
what is your I'd like to ask both of you. What is your explanation of the outcome of the Christ and Foster race?
Rick Chrysler won. I will tell you what other people have told us, because I'm not really free to tell you what my opinion is per se, because I'm not an opinionist and I'm not a bloviator. So I will tell you what other people have said. Other people, Chris Ingler, one of our respected analysts, basically said that somewhere along the line, maybe it was the pier, maybe it was raised baseball, but those were 2 issues that seemed to need more direct leadership, according to them. And some of that direct leadership did not come forward at a time when a lot of people wanted it. Having said that, now that Mr. Chrysler is the mayor, he will get to see in detail more of the details about the financial arrangement with the Tampa Bay Rays. And as I said before, he'll try to find out, after 62 public hearings, what you people in St. Petersburg really want in a pier, or do you even know?
I wrote about this the other day, and I think it's, to some extent, it reflects how well this city is doing. The city, nobody can say that Bill Foster was a terrible mayor, or that he's a bad guy at all. He's a very good guy. But people, I think, in this city has reached the point where they aspire more. And being a decent mayor is no longer enough, especially if you've got an alternative. The Chrysler campaign ran a good, cautious campaign where they basically said, I'm not going to blow up City Hall, I'm not going to do something crazy, but I think we can do better, and it seems to work.
Want to get some? Let's go to the back table over there, the young lady with the glasses. Thank you.
Not so young. Marion Edmonds. As we're talking about the congressional race, I wanted to ask each of you, what do you think we should be looking for as we decide between, or maybe among the candidates who are going to be running in this election? We haven't had to think about this during Bill Young's tenure. I never really had many real choices in the time I lived in St. Pete. So what should we be looking for? What is is going to matter in terms of our local presence, in terms of our representative?
Well, I would say this, and this would apply to a legislative race district also that is competitive. If you're talking about a district that Barack Obama lost by 7 points, there's always going to be a Republican there. And if you talk about a district like this is a swing district. This is truly middle of the road district. And so often we have these people, they will campaign, whether it's for local office or federal office, and say they're independent minded, they'll do this or that. And then they get up to Washington or they get up to Tallahassee, and they are terrified to do anything that goes against the leadership, that puts them on whatever committee they want or helps them raise money. That's sort of like Mike Fasano in Pasco County. It's so popular because he was a rare Republican that actually, he could demagogue with the best of them, but he did what he felt was right, even when it ticked off his leadership. So, we're going to see two very reasonable-minded people, I would assume, at least two, David Jolly and Alex Singh, who probably said pretty independent-minded. Well, let's really press them and see, well, what would you have done? Would you have been like every other Republican and been willing to shut down the government if you couldn't defund Obamacare? Alex Singh, where would you disagree? Actually, take a vote against Nancy Pelosi on a Democratic priority that you disagree with. So it's going to be tough, but I think you really want to see how independent are they, how much are they going to represent this ultimate battleground swing district as opposed to their party leader.
Yeah, and I would also say that the question that Alex Singh will have to answer is this. You're moving to Pinellas County. Whoopie-dip. You're going to live in Feather Sound. When did you sit in traffic on US 19? When did US 19 in front of your business get all ripped to shreds? When did your beach need to be nourished? Are you going to Washington because the Democrats need help in the House? Or are you going to Washington because you will do what Bill Young really did, which was look out for the little people? And he did a great job of that. I know there are some people in Congress who say, he was as bad as anybody else about earmarks. But I'm telling you, the guy saved McDill Air Force Base. If it weren't for him, McDill Air Force Base, as we know it today, may not exist. So those will be tough questions that will have to be answered by anybody who runs. Linda.
Linda Lerner, this is for Adam Smith. Your article yesterday about the mayoral election gave many reasons why Rick Kreisman won. You didn't mention the very strong editorial board support for him and the very strong editorial stand against Bill Foster. Was it not important, or are you not allowed to mention the editorial board? Is there something?
No, I actually do think, our editorial board has sort of been on a roll between Fluoride and County Commission, and they were pretty aggressive in this race. I was bidding our editor of editorials earlier in the day about how nervous he must be. If Bill Foster won, wow, they wouldn't have had a lot of visits from Bill Foster if he were in the second term. I think they made a big difference. I do. I couldn't quantify it, but they were very rough on Bill Foster and stayed that way through the campaign, whether you agree with them or not.
Then you got to follow. Go ahead.
Why did you write it in the paper?
Space. I thought about it, actually. And I would add something else. That's an easy cop-out. Somebody says that space. I actually thought about it, and it feels like two navel gazers, right, about something we did. But just as an aside, I would point out, everybody thinks the editorial board dictates what we do. I would argue, just as a reader, that our actual news coverage was significantly tougher on Kreisman than Foster. There were two big front page profiles. I thought Foster's was basically pretty positive, and Kreisman's was pretty negative. So it just goes to show.
Let's take one of our new members here that's just joining us right here right in front.
We've all seen polling, Ryan Lund. We've all seen polling where people are going to be disenfranchised when you're Republican or Democrat. You don't like your own elected official anymore. So it's 45% of the country want to see somebody else. Between Singh and Jolly, they both have been in politics, but one has served a former representative and one has been elected herself. How do you two see their political experience, one being elected and one being a former operative, playing out in the actual vote counts?
I have no opinion. I don't. Go ahead. No, I don't realize.
I think David Jolly, and I do think there probably will be another Republican, so we're not anointing him to nominate, but I think he will be able to say he can hit the ground running, he's got Washington experience. I know that everybody's thrilled with Washington experience. He's also a lobbyist. That's how he makes his living. And lobbyists are, barely a notch above journalism in popularity, so I'm sure he'll have to explain that.
Next question. That's right here in front. You've had your hand up quite a bit.
Terry Bryant. I'm concerned about, they said race influence on people size of the teachers, professors, newspapers, television, etc., ministers, and what have you. And what I'm concerned with is writers, not knowing so much with some of the television stations and writers who are obviously biased in some of their writing. So when you talk about the foster to the Christ in this one, I take who wrote what. And it would be quite interesting if you would agree as to when you write, why do you write and how do you write? Do you write on facts or do you write on your personal opinion?
That's easy for us. I don't have an opinion. I have an opinion, but we are, believe me, Adam and I both get as much hate mail from the left as the right. But the one guy who wrote me the email that said that I had a wonderful looking unit on the interview today, I just wanted to know that this really is my hair. This is not a unit. Okay? Admittedly, most of it has been moved from the back to the front. The last time I checked, it's still all mine.
Just not even talking about your hair. I think everybody in journalism has, there's no such thing as unbiased. Everybody's got their personal biases, everybody's got their personal experiences, and you try to balance those out. Sometimes you hear people say, if they think Howard Shell's kind of a jerk, and they're writing about him, or Adam Smith's kind of a jerk, then they're going to kind of bend over backwards to be a little extra positive about it. I think in that case, two side-by-side profiles by the same writer, I think it's a smart writer who wrote what he saw, and was looking at the records, and readers are not stupid. They think this person is clearly being unfair about the writing, and they can dismiss it. They think he's making valid, he's backing up what he's saying, and they can pay attention. How about the young guy?
Hi, I'm Sam Geddes from Safety High. Seeing as politics today are very heavily partisan, how much do you agree with Mayor Foster's statement that the mayoral race this year moved away from a grassroots style of campaign and more towards a partisan race?
Go ahead.
I know his father, Sam Goodis, dresses as garishly as I think the partisanship, there was a time, I talked to somebody when I was trying to find out who was the last Democrat elected mayor, I talked to Ray Arsenault, tried to pick his brains, and he had everybody's party wrong until recently. Because people just in the city truly did not know what party that these guys were with and didn't care. And I think that really changed with Rick Baker. He brought Jeb Bush down right away. He was a Republican. And I think that's, in a way, for better or worse, the campaigns got more sophisticated, more lavishly funded. And then I think this was probably the election where these are going to be completely partisan races from now on. The Democrats, who sort of have failed at almost everything they do statewide, have had a lot of success on these in mayoral races, and they were all in on this one. And the Republicans were a little slower to gain, and they were too.
I agree with you. Same thing. Yeah, you're back right there. Clear, thank you. It's very nice. Can I borrow something?
Hi, Kim Black. Thank you both for being here. I'm an avid watcher and reader. With all the attention on the congressional race and the governor's mansion, looking at our local races, do you think people will delete all those requests for $3 because they believe that politics are local and help contribute to our local candidates? Or will some squeak through on the ballot because people aren't paying attention in our upcoming races? We have school board, county commission, we have a lot of local pieces, but it seems like the focus is clearly on the congressional race and the governor's race.
Well, one of the advantages of having the focus on the congressional races and the governor's races is that more people will show up at the polls to actually vote. I mean, I'm still appalled. I spent a couple of years as a missionary in East Africa, where some of those nations were not so kind to people that tried to vote. So I'm always shocked and appalled. And if I could get on the air and preach, I would. When only 32% of the entire population of the city of St. Petersburg cared enough about this race to show up at the polls. I don't know what will happen, whether the $3 will do this, but all I know is that it's always been said, all politics is local. If you got a pit hole in the road in front of it, if you take action to try to get it fixed, you'll get involved in politics. But if you step back and let the machines roll and let them appeal to your lowest common denominator, which is fear, then we're in trouble. Then the local politician is going to have as much trouble as the national politician getting something to stick to make a person want to get up and vote.
I just think it kind of depends. If there's something going on that people care about, even if it's not the most important issue, if there's fluoride, if there's something that looks like your county commissioners are basically going to ignore science, suddenly the county commissioner is going to get a lot of attention. You're going to start paying attention to what they're saying. If the school board wants to do something drastic, you're going to have more people paying attention, as they always do with the upper level races. In some ways, those local races get more attention than who's the CFO or who's the Attorney General. Those are the races that they really struggle to get attention for, even though they're raising a lot of money.
This will be the last question, please.
For a female.
Tiffany Ficus. I'm not crazy about either candidate for governor, but with two such big names, what are the chances of someone else coming forward to run against Chris and Scott, and what are their chances of actually having a shot at it?
Great opportunity for me to announce that I am running for governor of the state of Florida.
I think the chances would normally be really good, except if you have somebody that is, in the last election, spent $75 million of their own money and made it clear he'd be willing to do that again. It's not going to happen. The Scott people were very, very worried that he would have a Republican primary opponent, and so they kind of let it be known he's planning to spend $100 million in this campaign, and all the people that were sort of sniffing around at that, they just disappeared. So there's no way that's going to happen. The credible person for the runner is that term.
And I just want to take a couple of seconds to thank you for those of you that didn't switch to Verizon, and for those of you who don't listen to White House. And thank you personally, because I know that when Adam and I do our programs, we don't, yes, we're making a paycheck on it, but we do it for you. We do it for you, the voters that spend the time watching it, and I can't thank you enough for putting your trust in us. And I can tell you that Adam and I work very hard at what we do. We anguish, and if anything, because of our own personal views, you find out as a journalist, sometimes you tend to compensate on the other side. So when somebody's calling and saying, why are you being so difficult on the Republican? Or why are you being so difficult on the Democrat? Well, because we tend to try to play devil's advocate, because we know those are the kind of questions you want answered. And we don't want the politicians to show up and just spend 9 minutes of our time going through their talking points. But thank you again on behalf of the White House, and thank you.